YouTube vinyl community, mamas and the papas fans, random people on the internet. My name is Giggens. Hello again. We're here to do an album review on albums that don't really get a fair deal of attention on the internet. Today's album, the Mamas and the Papas, People Like Us, released in 1971. Now, this album, for those of you who don't know it, it's okay if you don't know it. It really isn't their best album. I'm just going to throw that out there right off the bat. I wrote a lot of notes about this one. In a nutshell, the Mamas and the Papas owed an album to ABC Records. When their first label, Dunhill, got bought by ABC Records, ABC was going through their contracts and realized that, hey, in this clause here, it says the Mamas and the Papas owe us one more new album. To which the Mamas and the Papas, which were already broken up at this point, got together and said, alright, fine, let's do it. And they put out this. Now, to back up and give you a little bit of history here, I mean, the Mamas and the Papas are one of the biggest selling 60s groups of all time, probably with big hits like Monday, Monday, California Dreamin', I Saw Her Again, I mean, the list goes on. They provided some of the best 60s sunshine pop you can ask for. And they were also incredibly tumultuous in their personal lives with each other, with having affairs with each other, being married and having affairs with each other, having affairs with other people. I mean, it was the 60s, man. Groovy. And so they did a handful of albums. They put out 3 or 4. They put out 3 albums. They basically kind of went on a break. Dunhill put out a greatest hits album called Farewell to the First Golden Era Volume 1, which did humongously well. They came back, did one more album, broke up again, and this time, a lot of people say it was because Mama Cass wanted to go solo, while a lot of people say they were tired of each other. Whatever the case was, they broke up, went their different ways. Michelle went into movies, John continued music, Mama Cass went into doing her very popular solo career, and Denny did an album in 1970 or 71 also. So, by the time you get to this thing, you know, the times had changed. Music had changed, and the era that supported them had either moved on or grown up. And they were kind of, you gotta contextualize it a little bit. Back then, if you weren't still putting out new music, you were kind of a dinosaur. You know, I mean, when the Beatles came out, people thought Elvis Presley was like George Washington or something. This ancient entity that was so of the past that it didn't seem relevant anymore. And some people even found the Beatles to be that way in the 70s. That's a whole different subject, whole different story. Anyways, so this was their 5th and final album as a group. And, you know, it's, compared to their other albums, it's definitely missing a giant spark of the energy that the 60s albums had. And Michelle Phillips classically put it, this album sounds like 4 people trying to avoid a lawsuit. Which is what would have happened if it wasn't made. They would have each been fined $250,000, which in these days terms is like 1.6 million bucks. Not very cheap. All the songs are written by John Phillips, and one song is co-written with John and Michelle. The very first album that features all originals by the Mamas and the Papas on an album. Mama Cass is barely on this album. Varying reports say she was sick, she had an illness. Her voice, some people think John Phillips lowered her voice in the mix because her solo career was so big and he was like doing it despite her. What a mess, you guys. What a mess. So anyways, this album, in a nutshell, it's a very laid-back, kind of chill album compared to the bombastic, adventurous, you know, new land clearing amazingness that was Monday, Monday, California Dreamin', I Saw Her Again Last Night, Dream a Little, Dream of Me. You know, that was a band that was hungry and ready to prove themselves. This album really does sound like 4 people who had to get together and make an album. And even then, they didn't even make it together. They couldn't, you know, schedules and conflicts got in the way and had to do it individually, layer by layer, and then kind of build it up from individual tracks. So I have no idea how much of this album was actually recorded with them as a unit, but apparently a lot of it was recorded separately. So There was only one single released from this album called Step Out. That was released in January of '72. This album came out in November of '71. The single went to number 81 on the Billboard US charts, hit number 25 on the Adult Contemporary charts, so it was a little better. The album itself went to number 84, and this was the first Mamas and the Papas album to never reach the top 20. It didn't even chart at all in the UK. The only single, like I said, was called Step Out, and it almost seems like it was chosen to not do well. And, you know, because there were rumors that when this was coming out, they were going to go on tour, they were going to promote it, they were going to do the whole shebang. None of that happened. I really think because they were broken up and they wanted to stay that way. They didn't want to have to get back together again. Mama Cass was killing it with her solo career. John was putting out critically acclaimed albums that weren't selling as well, but they were still getting good reviews. Michelle was doing crazy stuff with her acting. So they were busy. They didn't want to be Mamas and the Papas anymore. I mean, Mama Cass even had a special called Don't Call Me Mama anymore. So, you know, there were 3 or 4 other songs on this album that would have made freaking killer singles. And, okay, I'm using killer singles in the sense that, you know, those were standout moments on this album. Definitely nowhere near in comparison to their 60s peak, by far. The title track, People Like Us, is a really chill, groovy, laid-back kind of vibe with excellent, tight vocal harmonies. You know, that's one thing this album does have, even though the songs definitely aren't up to par with their 60s peak, the vocals are still there. As uninspired and sometimes lazy as they might be, the Mamas and the Papas at their laziest is still better than a lot of other bands. So, you know, take it with a grain of salt. Pacific Coast Highway, the next song on the album, it's not really doing it for me. Kind of a cheesy, hokey rock and roll song. Doesn't do much for me. Snow Queen of Texas has hints of their past glories. Mama Cass has heard a little bit on this one. You know, this one's okay. Shooting Star would have been an excellent single, just like People Like Us would have been an excellent single. A shuffling bass line, there's a life and a soul on this song. The background vocals are totally, you know, of their 60s peak. Step Out is the next song, and while it has really wonderful, enunciated, clear production and crisp vocals, and these nice airy background vocals, it's got a People Like Us vibe. Man, I don't know why they chose this as a single. I really don't. It's almost like they wanted it to not succeed, so they didn't have to be Mamas and Papas. Lenny Genevieve has a really good chorus section and a really cool ending section with the flutes and this like funky rhythm going on. No Dough, no joke, is one of the best songs on the album. Excellent melodies. It's pure sunshine pop. It's just these call and response vocals. This sounds like a Mamas and Papas song. You know, if they made 9 more of those, this would have been one of their best albums, hands down. European Blue Boy features steel drums, and it's just, I'm not feeling that one at all. Pearl is a Janis Joplin tribute, and that's not bad. It's a kind of a cool jam. I Want to Be a Star is the one that Michelle and John wrote together. Does nothing for me. It's just this story about someone trying to make it and want their name in lights and signing autographs, which it just sounds hokey and doesn't do anything for me. Grasshopper's not bad, and Blueberries for Breakfast is just this weird song with a couple of weird rhyming lines. I don't get it. Here's the back cover. And original copies of the album actually came with a lyric sheet, and so that's what this looks like. Just has all the words on it, which that's pretty cool, you know. And I'll show you the label of the LP here. Where are we? The old Dunhill Records label there. ABC Dunhill at that point. This album, it's produced by John Phillips, you know, and during this time, he was really into drugs. He was doing heroin, and it's just kind of a bad scene. So I don't know if the songs lack spark because of his drug influence, or they lack spark because they didn't want to be with each other. If they lack spark because they didn't want to do this project, there's a lot working against it. The Mamas and the Papas at their best, are mind-blowing. I mean, they would sometimes spend numerous painstaking vocal takes on literally like 3 or 4 words in a section of a song just to get the feeling and emotion right. Very Brian Wilson-esque in that sense. To add insult to injury, this is kind of an extra thing on top of it. While ABC Records bought Dunhill and they were going through stuff in the early 70s, they deemed the Mamas and the Papas original masters, the stereo sessions and the mono mixes, they deemed them, quote, obsolete and expensive to store, and thusly destroyed them all, because that's what companies do. So therefore, most Mamas and the Papas reissues are made using 2nd generation or 3rd generation tapes, which, if you know about tapes, they get worn out after a while, and if you reuse them, it's just going to sound crappier and crappier. So that's why when you hear a 60s Mamas and the Papas album, it sounds fantastic. Sometimes the CDs sound absolutely terrible, or thin, or, you know, chintzy. Sundays, however, Sundays Records, found a mono master at one point and put it out in 2012 of If You Can Believe Your Eyes and Ears. So that's pretty cool. But, man, you know, it's kind of a sad ending to the Mamas and the Papas. This was the last album they ever made, although Denny made an unreleased album which featured both Mama Cass and Michelle on background vocals. Never got released. It came out, or they made it right before Mama Cass passed away. If I had to rate this album, you know, I was trying to look at it from a standpoint of just judging this on its own for what it is and not comparing it to the other works, but it's really hard to do that because their other works were so influential and so groundbreaking and so emotional and full of this charisma and youth and spunk and fire. Where this album sounds like people who happen to get together on a Sunday afternoon with some half-baked ideas, put it on vinyl and sell it and say, well, here it is. It's just, sounds like people like us. If I had to rate this album, I really think I'd give it probably like a 4 out of 10. It's not so good, Al. You know, I really tried to give this the benefit of the doubt, and take it for what it is. But every song, not every song, but I would say 70% of the album sounds like the same song. This is meandering. Here we go again. Here's some words. Here's a song. It's done. There are moments of greatness on here. I think People Like Us is one of the best songs that they've ever done. You know, there's a vibe on that song that is, it would have been nice to have seen them explore that more. And that would have been a way better single. I think this album would have fared better for them historically had that been a single. Or even Shooting Star, for that matter. But Step Out, I think, was a misstep in the wrong direction. You know, this has been Album Reviews. You can't win them all, guys. Thanks for watching. Thanks for commenting. Thanks for doing what you do. And thanks for being you, you know? Thanks for being you. Thanks for being people like you. My name is Giggens. This has been Album Reviews with the Mamas and the Papas. People like us. See you next time, guys.